You're listening to the Moose on the Loose, your 10 minutes action-packed financial podcast with your host, Mike Yahoo. Hey, what's up, Market Moose? This is Mike from the Moose on the Loose. I hope you're doing well. You know who's not on vacation? Businesses reporting earnings, my friend. Wow. It's been about 2 weeks now that we get results, and some Canadian companies started to report earnings. So today we are going to look at the three telcos, Rogers, Bell, and Telus. And tomorrow I'll do kind of like a melting pot of like multiple earnings that crossed my my desk, my radar over the past 2 weeks. So let's get started. I wanted to talk a little bit more about telcos because I know a lot of you guys hold at least one of them. You're probably a bit worried about Bell and Telus yield and payout ratio and dividend safety altogether. So we're going to talk about that. But first, let's take a look at Rogers. Rogers did pretty okay. I mean, like revenues up like 1%, 5.1 billion. So pretty normal quarter at this point. All three telcos are actually offering rebates and stuff like that to calm down the government so they don't go heavy after them due to the fact that the government of Canada doesn't really like the fact that they're like three major player in the wireless industry. They control like 90% of all wireless services. So not so great for competition. We all know we pay a lot for those services. And every single time I look at my Bell bills, I mean, it's always going up, right? It's kind of crazy. But yeah, so they're trying to do a few things. So I might go shop around and see if I can get a better deal because honestly, I'm a bit upset about how much I paid, but I'm sure that you can feel the pain. So revenues up only 1%. Earnings per share were up 14%, which is pretty cool. Most of it just companies' cost savings, focus. They're trying to cut down on their fees. Now it's showing a little bit more on the earnings, and yeah. So besides that, not much to say about Rogers earnings. The only other thing is the wireless revenues increased by 4%, which is great, but that's about it. So the media business is not doing that nice, and that's unfortunate, but pretty much expected. Moving on to Telus. I wanted to do Telus first because they show a similar profile in terms of the revenue was down 2%, but the earnings jumped 32%. So same thing, good performance from the wireless segment, good performance on the earnings as the company focused on cost-saving initiatives. That was a good thing. They also lowered their CapEx. And I told you before, if you're worried about the dividend for Telus and Bell, because I mean, Rogers has not increased its dividend in ages, so it's going to be relatively stable, but the other two are kind of like raising concerns among the investors community. So look at the cash flow metrics. So operating cash flow or cash flow from operation, CapEx or capital expenditure, and then free cash flow. So for Telus, those were pretty solid. So operating cash flow increased by 24 million to 1.4 billion. CapEx decreased by 14% to almost 700 million, so 691. So this is what we want to see from those big telcos. More cash flow from operation, less cash flow spent on projects, so smaller capital expenditure. So good news, free cash flow exploded by 71% to 478 million, which was unfortunately expected. So management actually revised their cash flow guidance for 2024, and they went from 2.3 billion to 2.1. So a little bit smaller, unfortunately, but still enough to cover the dividend this year. I'm expecting another dividend increase towards the end of this year. But moving forward after in 25, it's definitely going to slow down. It's pretty much written everywhere. Just a few note on their growth vectors that are doing a little bit better now. So health services revenue increased by 4%. Agriculture and consumer goods jumped by 15%. That's related to their latest acquisitions. They're increasing the numbers that are subscribe to their healthcare services as well. So on that part, it is doing well. The only downsides was for TELUS International revenue declined by 8%, still struggling to get clients on this space. We see that the revenues, not the revenue, but clients have like tighter budget. They spend a little bit less for those kind of services. And unfortunately, TELUS is a bit struggling on that part. But overall, it was an okay quarter. I'm glad to see the cash flow metrics going up. I'm glad to see that the earnings are going up, driven by cost savings initiatives. So those are like good news. Now moving on to Bell. Oh, and one last thing, their interest rate, their interest paid increased by about 7% on this one. So that's important because for Bell, we're going to also look at how much they paid in interest, and that was a lot more. So the thing is, we do have another telco showing not much movement from the revenue. So 6 billion in revenue, down 1%. So just to keep that in mind, we had Rogers slightly up, and then Bell and TELUS minus 1 and 2%. So not a great quarter in terms of growth. For the earnings, though, the adjusted EPS was also down to 1.3%. So not crazy down, but still not positive. At least cash from operation was up. Not up actually, but down 10%. But CapEx was down 25%. So at least the cash flow from operation went up by 8. So smaller cash from operation, but a lot smaller for the capital expenditure. That led to a little bit more free cash flow, which is great. So BCE reported that they paid 937 million in dividend for that quarter. Their free cash flow was almost at 1.1 billion. So for a cash payout ratio of 85. So it is, I mean, it's not enough to celebrate, let's be honest, but at least it's not enough to panic. So overall, it's good news. The last bad news from this quarter is interest paid was up by 19% versus last year, and they do have more debt that will come to be renewed. And do not make the simple mistake of thinking, oh, but Bank of Canada just cut their interest rate twice over the past few months, so it's all going to be good. No, we're not back to interest rate that were given like 3, 5, 6, 10 years ago, right? We're way above that level, and Bell is going to feel it. Actually, all telcos are going to feel it, but Bell is already on that path of renewal right now, and it's going to cost a little bit more. So overall, nothing new under the sun for those three big telcos. I'm still not a big fan of Rogers, mostly because they don't increase their dividend. I'm not a fan of Bell because they're struggling to generate growth, and at this point, I'm not too sure how they're going to make it. So I'm glad that their cash metrics are improving, but it maybe not enough for next year if interest rate keeps on rising. So you'll have to be a bit careful on that. And as for TELUS, I do have in my portfolio. I'm not super happy because I don't see much growth. I see an improvement for earnings. I see an improvement for cash flow metrics, which both are good news. But if they are not able to increase their revenue, there's so much that they will be able to cut down the road, right? So right now, I still see TELUS as a high risk, high reward type of play, but I'm not like super enthusiastic in a sense where it's really hard for me to see growth potential where it has to come from TELUS International, their health and their agriculture segments. The wireless will remain a cash cow. It will be good, but it's not going to generate like incredible growth going forward. And this is what we see so far in 2024. So Interest rates are still going to be a source of concern. Cash flow is still going to be a source of concern. In the meantime, I'm not immediately worried, but they must be monitored. All of those three must be monitored very closely every single quarter. All right, Moose, that's enough for today. If you have enjoyed this show, please forward it to friends or at least give me a 5-star rating on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. It means the world to me. If you need to reach me, the podcast is now on YouTube as well, so you can comment there, and I read all the comments. I'm trying to reply back to most of them, but time is getting thin these days. But anyways, I read all of those for sure. So, all right, Moose, take good care, and tomorrow it's going to be a melting pot of earnings review. Take care and stay invested.
Hey, welcome to the disclaimer. If you're listening to The Moose and the Loose, you cannot really expect me to give you buy or sell recommendation or financial advice, right? You're here for fun, you're here for information and some entertainment. But I am not your financial advisor, I am not your broker, so therefore I'm not liable if you're losing money after listening to the podcast. If you're looking for some advice, go see a professional. If not, you can enjoy this show and do your due diligence after it.